all these questions that have been fed into our mind, like who am I? What am I doing in this earth? Whether we are alone, those are useless questions because if our lifespan is like 100 years, we are in front of eternity, we are just blip. We are gone. There is no definition of God in any Hindu scriptures. Can you believe that? There
As
is no
far as
God.
like this is what God is.
There is no God. And God appears and just says that, yes, my son, I exist. Then what?
But so how do you define God then? Because if you define spirituality as introspection and talking to yourself, how would you define God? Or would you define it as something else that there's a universal consciousness as opposed to a God-like figure that religions have?
Yeah, Hinduism does talk about universal consciousness, and that's Shiva. Lord Shiva is a symbolic meaning of universal consciousness, and Parvati is the energy. So, with the combination of consciousness and energy, everything moves, including planets and whatnot. Like those are basic two energies, consciousness and basic two fundamental elements you can say, consciousness and energy. Now, about God, there is no definition of God in any Hindu scriptures. Can you believe that? There
As
is no
far as
God.
like this is what God is?
There is no God. What you see, what you can describe, what you can imagine, none of them is God.
Why? Or why not, I guess?
Because because God is a creation of a human mind. Can
Mhm.
right? I was thinking the other day, like I was watching some dolphin documentary, and I was thinking dolphins are smarter. Like, do they have God? And they might have, based on their level of intelligence, they might have their God, but we don't know about them. Same way, they don't know about our God. So it's just creation of the individual minds. What will happen if I say God exists? Let's say tomorrow you are a very like you pray with like total devotion and everything, and this applies to anyone. And God appears and just says that, yes, my son, I exist. Then what?
Mm.
Nothing is going to change in our lives. So the question of whether God exists or not, or the question whether what we were before we born or what we are going to be after we die, whether we are going to hell or heaven, those questions are useless because getting answers of this question doesn't change our life a bit. Maybe it will make us little more conscious and
Of
little
our
more
actions, yeah.
more careful about our actions and
Mhm.
help us live fully because those answers doesn't help us anyway.
Do you think that it should? Like if
No, it
God
shouldn't.
if hmm?
It shouldn't because
No?
that reminds me a story from Gautam Buddha. This is really really short story. Gautam Buddha sitting there one day and with the disciples, and two people appear. Two people came to him. One was who believed in God, and one who was atheist. He didn't believe in God. So one person who believed in God came to Buddha and asked, "Does God exist?" Buddha says, "No, God doesn't exist." The second person who didn't believe in God came to Buddha and asked, "Does God exist?" And Buddha to atheists says, yes, God exists. So he gave answers, opposite answers to both people.
Uh-huh.
And one of the disciple was watching it, and he asked after they both went away, like, why did you give them like opposite answer? And simple reply from Buddha was like, if I gave them the right answer, which actually doesn't exist, but if I gave them the answer that they are looking for, the quest will be ended here, and
Hmm.
they will have no goal in their life to launch for.
So
So
it's the search, the seeking that
yes,
is
yes,
at the root of purpose.
yes.
Then shouldn't that be one of the most important things, if not the most important thing that we focus on in terms of, I
Searching for
mean,
what?
that's a good question. But in context, it's a search for God. Does God exist or does not God not exist? That's the question of the example with the
Mhm.
two people that went to Buddha. So if that seeking is at the core of the purpose of our lives, then no
Mhm.
matter what someone's religious belief, where they were born or whatever, it should be a continued goal to, I want to learn more. I want to know myself more. I want to connect with, I mean, it's hard to define it without saying the word. I want to connect more with God. Okay, so what does that mean? So in your framework of how you see it, if it's not important to know whether God exists or not, then what is the seeking? What are you seeking?
Seeking is brain's natural, a fundamental thing to do. Our brain, like if you try to stop thinking for 5 minutes, nobody can. It's a nature of mind to seek. It's nature of mind to chatter. It's nature of mind to constantly, bother us. Now, it can be trained.
Mhm.
The thing is, it can be directed, but it requires a constant practice of years. So,
Sure.
like finding for a purpose that has no meaning, like to me, answer whether God exists or not, that doesn't help. Because there will be next question now, where God is, right? Or why he is not showing up to me if God exists. So it opens up the unnecessary question, which I don't care, because what I care about, like, okay, I like planting some vegetables. So I'm going to do research on that. I'm going to launch for that. Like, how do I make sure I avoid diseases, or what do I do for, growing it organically? So there are billions of other things to, starve for, to go for. And all these questions just have been fed into our mind, like, who am I? What am I doing in this earth? Whether we are alone? Those are useless questions, because if our lifespan is like 100 years, we are in front of eternity. We are just blip. We are gone.
Yeah.
So I don't want to waste that time answering those questions, because those questions, like those answers, won't be helpful for me in any way, because after 100 years, my existence is no more.
Is your existence no more, or is this version of you?
I don't exist. Science, like spirituality, must go hand on hand with science, right? We are made of carbons and atoms. In Christianity, they were buried, right, after the death. That means you are going to decompose. In Hinduism, they burn the dead. That means it's gone. It's in the ashes.
I've
The
been
atoms
to
remains.
was it by Varanasi,
Varanasi.
yeah, and just we've seen like the whole process. It's really interesting. They build the like the altar and then burn the body, and yeah, it's an interesting process.
So yeah, in order, like, see how we remember things from the references, right? This happened to me. That means, like, I touched the hot water. That means it's hot. So it's experience. Experience is stored where? In mind, right? And when mind is decomposed, or mind is burning the fire, there is no mind to begin with which stored. It's like just computer, right? It's a hard drive that burns, and you cannot recover the data at all.
So you think
not
that
different from that.
When we die, we just go back into
the nature,
everything else in nature. So then what would you say is the purpose of our existence? Do we have a purpose? Is it simply to be like the dolphins, or is there some deeper purpose where consciousness, or the divine God consciousness, there has to be some sort of cosmic intelligence to this whole thing, right? Like you were saying, I think it's called Shiva. No, there's not.
No, it's purely coincident, right? You are talking to me right now, right? We never met, but we are talking about a very important topic. Do you think it's just because I sent an invite? No, it's a series of coincidences, right? I was somehow, I registered myself on the matchmaker, not expecting any, invitations or anything. Went back to do my software engineering thing, went back to help someone else. Then all of a sudden I'm seeing a message. So nothing was planned. Everything just happened. You can say that God planned it, but that is after the fact. We never say that God will do A thing, B thing, C, and thing D in year 1, 2, and 3, right? We don't predict it.
Right,
we just go back and say God planned it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So no, that this is just purely coincident. And our brains are just kind of like brainwashed for a long time, for good reason, honestly, for good reason. Because if we start thinking what we are talking right now, people will eventually go mad.
That's an interesting point of view. Because for us, I think we're curious about this topic. And so it's something that we enjoy looking at. Whereas, yeah, I think maybe for a lot of people, if they look at it too deeply, they will go crazy. And that's why people avoid it. Because our existence or non-existence, our mortality, there's entire philosophies about the way people look at death or don't look at death, and then how that changes the entire way that they live, etc. I'm just most curious because I have always had a spiritual connection, and I do believe that there's something bigger and a bigger purpose than simply a coincidence of existence. Because that's almost terrifying to think about in that way.
That's why we have to force ourselves from
real, right?
Yeah.
And I like being alive, and so I like the idea of being eternally alive. That I was alive before. Maybe there's multiple lifetimes. Maybe that I reincarnated, and I'm learning. Because I like to learn. I like to be productive. I like to work hard. I like to get better and better and better at things. And so the idea of multiple lifetimes of spiritual growth across that spectrum is
Hmm.
interesting to me and exciting. The idea of, well, you just die and then there's nothingness. Like that's so honestly
Yeah.
terrifying because what would it be like to
See,
just be nothing? Like then I no longer exist. So then like what is the point
yeah.
of this whole thing?